Welcome to Unit 0, the imaginary unit of middle school science. This unit deals with scientific inquiry and also steps for your scholars to be successful in creating their own science fair project. This unit is unique compared to the other units in that it exists throughout semester 1. I have it beginning within the second week of school and continuing all the way to the second to the last week of the semester. I am Andrea Troxel, the 8th grade science CTL. I am at Infinity Middle School, and my email is atroxel@uplifteducation.org. On the scope and sequence, scientific inquiry is not listed as a separate unit. It is included together in the chemistry unit. Scientific inquiry is not the type of thing that you just teach within the first few weeks in the year, and then you don't come back to it for the rest of the year. It is something that should be incorporated into everyday lessons all year long, which goes along with our IB, and being inquirers. And so a good scientific inquiry basis will help your scholars be successful in high school. The other part of the scientific inquiry unit for Unit 0 is the science fair. The other half of Unit 0 includes the science fair. Science fair is extremely important for our IB requirements. Whether your school is going through authorization or being evaluated, scholars need to conduct an independent investigation in science class. Science fair is a way to authentically assess criterion B and C. Science fair in middle school will also help prepare scholars for the diploma program. In the diploma program, they have to create their own independent project, and science fair is a good stepping stone to get them ready for that independent project. The reason that I've added science fair to a unit plan and added lessons throughout the semester is to help create a scaffold for your scholars to be successful. We all know that if we allow scholars to work independently at home, most of them probably won't do it. But if we have actual tasks and lessons to be completed throughout the semester, scholars are more likely to do the science fair and also be successful. This is stage 1 of the unit plan. Pay special attention to the duration of the unit, that there are 4 class periods that deal with inquiry, and then an additional 6 class periods throughout the semester if you want to include science fair in your lessons. The key concepts and related concepts deal with relationships, evidence, and patterns. The global context is scientific and technical innovation, products, processes, and solutions. Obviously, with scientific inquiry and the science fair, the scientific process is a very big part of that. The statement of inquiry: processes allow evidence to be arranged into patterns that describe solutions, relationships, and connections. Some of the big picture inquiry questions center around collection of evidence, arranging that evidence into patterns, and then can that evidence be misinterpreted, or is an analysis of your evidence needed? The TEKS and standards included in Unit 0 are all process TEKS. On the STAR test, process TEKS are not assessed individually. They are assessed along with a content TEK. Most of those questions are dual described. So the scholars may have to answer a question about chemistry, but they have to analyze a chart in order to do so. The interdisciplinary connections that could be used for Unit 0 can change throughout the semester based on what you're doing. Some possible connections would include with language and literature, where scholars would write rough drafts of their laboratory reports, and then they may use some of their language arts strategies to peer review, to edit, and revise their reports before their final drafts. Another interdisciplinary connection could be through mathematics. Depending on the skills of the scholar, they could run statistical analyses of their results, or they could just use their mathematics classes to help them in the creation of graphs and in analyzing data. In the arts, scholars can use their visual arts class to help make their information accessible to the public, which would be the production of a display board. And then also through performance classes, they could practice their speech and preparation for answering questions from the judges. Stage 2 is showing what the scholars have learned. The GRASPS assignment for Unit 0 is quite simply their science fair project. When introducing science fair to your scholars, you will need to stress to them the audience, that you are not the only audience. They will also be showing their project to judges and the community at large, including parents and guests of the school. One item that I want to draw your attention to are the products of the GRASPS assignment. Number 1 is a science journal that details all the steps of their process. Usually in middle school, scholars do not have a science journal, and that can disqualify them when they're in high school science fairs and also in more advanced science fairs. Be sure that as scholars are working on their science fair project, that they are writing down everything they are doing in a science journal set on their table in front of their project board. They should also formulate a 2 to 4 minute speech summarizing their project. They present their project through a speech, then questions will be asked by the judge. Lastly, they should have a trifold display board that includes graphics, lists, data, with everything spelled correctly and having it organized, colorful, and neat. When it comes to assessing the science fair, we usually concentrate on criterion B and C. You could also add criterion A and D if you wanted to use all strands from all criterion all on one project. They could use criterion A through their background research, and also the last strand of criterion D, where they document the work of other sources of information used. Criterion D could also include their reflections or their final steps of their science fair project that applies what they've learned to the community at large. But the easiest to test with would be criterion B and C. For stage 3 backwards planning, there are 2 different timelines to choose from if you're going to do a science fair project in your classroom. You can look at the Science Course Structure Guide, and the very last page has a list or a timeline that you can use to help plan science fair in your classroom. I also provide a timeline in the unit plan for scientific inquiry in the science fair. My unit plan is focused a little bit more on the skills the scholars will need in order to actually do a science fair project. On approaches to learning, there are 2 major skills scholars will need for a long-term project like this. I have specified organizational skills dealing with managing time and creating short and long-term assignments to meet deadlines. Scholars will probably need to practice in utilizing planners for both daily short-term assignments and also long-term assignments. The other skill will be critical thinking and evaluating issues and ideas. They will have to interpret data collected and then draw reasonable conclusions. The major form of differentiation would be scholars are able to choose their own project based on their own interests and abilities. For formative assessments, the scientific journal will be the main form of formative assessment throughout the unit until you get to the display board and the presentation. The scientific process is used all the time in the real world. Most of these resources will be helpful when it comes to the scientific process, creating conclusions, creating data tables. There is also listed on there the course structure guide that has a section about science fair. And then in the textbook, there are only 2 lessons that deal with scientific inquiry. For daily planning, the first 4 days are listed as scientific inquiry. If you choose not to do science fair in your classroom, you would go through those first 4 days and then go into the chemistry unit. Day 1 deals with safety in the lab. Though lab safety is very rarely tested on STAR, it is critical that scholars have a background in safety and the safety procedures you expect in your class for them to be able to participate in lab safely. Day 2 concentrates on using lab equipment properly to get accurate measurements. There is a simple lab that you can do in your class where they measure different objects. This sort of simple lab helps scholars gain experience using laboratory equipment. Day 3 concentrates on collecting information in a data table and drawing conclusions. Please note the inquiry questions from Stage 1 are listed in the objective section of Stage 3 backwards planning. Day 4 gets more specific into independent and dependent variable. Day 5 of Unit 0 starts the first day dedicated to science fair preparation. If you notice the dates, I have science fair in my classroom dedicated to Wednesdays. Day 5 includes the introduction of the science fair project and schedule, the beginning of that time management that was listed in the approaches to learning, and the identification of a testable question or hypothesis. Scholars will start determining some questions that interest them to plan for their science fair. Day 6 is dedicated to researching about their topic and identifying the variables that they are going to use in their science fair project. Please remind scholars that if they can Google their question and find the answer, it is not good enough for a science fair project. On day 7, scholars are finalizing their hypothesis, variables, and creating their procedures. Remind scholars that before they are to start their science fair project, you have to approve their procedures. Hopefully by this point in time, Scienteer, the online program used for science fair projects, will be up and running, and scholars will be able to submit this information to you online rather than giving you paper copies. Day 8, if you notice the date, is about a month after day 7. In the month of September and October, scholars should be completing their science fair projects at home. By the time they come back at the end of October and beginning of November, they should have their data. Part of their approaches to learning with time management means that within that month that they don't see you, they should be completing their assignment and then bringing the data back for day 8. You will concentrate on organizing that in charts and graphs and creating conclusions based on their data. On day 9, they are going to evaluate their procedures and their hypothesis and find ways to improve the design of their project. Day 10 happens after Thanksgiving break. Scholars will collect all of their information, their write-ups, their graphs, and present it on a display board. Your school science fair should be held at the end of the first semester. That wraps up Unit 0 about scientific inquiry and the science fair. Remember, if you have any questions, you can email me at atroxel@uplifteducation.org. Also check in during office hours and virtual roundtables. As some of the science fair deadlines approach, those will be addressed during office hours.